Yes, I will. It is Saturday, April 11th, and welcome to another edition of the Armstrong Williams Show. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, we have our CIA operative and Andrew Donaldson in the first half hour of the show, and then later on we're going to turn to the economy. But let me throw a monkey wrench into the conversation. Andrew, is there anything else going on in the world in terms of foreign policy other than the United States, Iran, and Israel?
Who is that for, Armstrong?
Andrew Donaldson, and I don't think he's hearing me because he has his head down. But Mr. Operative, you answer that because I don't think his mic is on. Go ahead, Mr. Operative.
Well, there's a tremendous amount of discussion going on because of what's going on in the streets, because the Iranians have introduced this issue about a toll process, and you have to pay to pass through the waterway. That's a direct violation of all maritime regulatory structure that we've all lived under for centuries, I believe.
Whoa, let me stop you. Didn't our president say that he would like to partner in that business deal?
I thought that's what he said.
No, not thought. That's what he said.
Well, if he said it, he's way outside the lines on maritime law. And the freedom of navigation has been on the books. Now, if he's intending to change that, he's certainly, I guess he can do it. I don't know whether he can do that or not, but it's a treaty structure that everybody agrees to, freedom of navigation. The oceans are not taxable or payable assets. You don't own the water. You have territorial waters. If you want to charge a port fee, you can charge that within your 12-mile limit. But once you're on the navigation on the seas, you can't introduce something like that without a tremendous amount of resistance coming from it, because that cost will be passed on. It's not going to be borne by the shipping agent. They're going to tack on a fee to cover that cost, which will mean that the discount price is lower, and the cost of moving oil will be borne by the customer, because that fee will be passed on.
So let me raise this with having this discussion. You know, when we think about this conflict with Iran, we like to think about it in the present time that we find ourselves today. But you know, the United States is a 250-year-old empire, and the Persian Empire, known now as Iran, has been around for 8,000 years. And Iran and the old Persia have been fighting this kind of conflict for thousands of years, just different iterations and different variations, but this is what they do. And for us, I heard the president say that he was thinking about wiping out a civilization. Does he really understand what Iran is and what it represents in terms of the United States and what we're fighting?
I don't know, but I do know that there's certain words that I think you shouldn't be using. The U.S. doesn't have an empire. We've never been an empire because we've never sought to conquer lands and take control of them. We have our own foreign policy, which people can agree with or not. However, we don't ask, and we're not expanding the country by force. That's one of the things that Colin Powell put to bed really quickly in a discussion with NATO, is the only lands we have ever asked for, and we asked for them after a conflict, was a place to bury our dead. That's why there's cemeteries all over Europe and some other parts of the world, in North Africa, for instance, that we have graveyards. That's it. And if you're going to meddle in the international shipping arena, it's important that you have maritime lawyers advise you on what you can and can't do according to the regulatory structure. If you choose to do something else, you know, the president can do or say whatever he wants.
So let me ask you to strip away the rhetoric, Andrew, and what is the actual situation on the ground between Iran, the United States, and Israel right now?
Unclear, and that's the problem. The president apparently outsourced the agreement that he agreed to have the meeting that we're going to negotiate agreement to the Pakistanis and others. Israel doesn't seem to be a party to that and says we're going to keep doing our own thing. We have confusion on what we're going to do, and now apparently we're going to do another deadline maybe and more threatening. This is part of the problem. The rhetoric isn't matching the actions. We seem to have not put together an effective coalition of who was in or out ahead of time, and now we're trying to do that ad hoc after the fact. This is confusion. Confusion goes to leadership. Confusion and leadership go to, did you have a thorough plan for past the first little bit? Because there's only so many military targets you can bomb. Then the hard decisions got to be made. Are you going to hit infrastructure? Are you going to hit more civilian-related targets? That's what we backed off of, but it goes to, this is chaos, and it's unclear, and it's unclear because the leadership and the plan was not in place appropriately to start with.
So let me stay with you there. Then, would you consider this a genuine ceasefire, or is it a pause for repositioning?
I think we don't have anything on paper, so no, it's not an official ceasefire because nobody's actually agreed to anything other than verbally on social media, and that and $5.95 will get you a caramel macchiato at Starbucks. Everybody involved does seem to understand that we're kind of on a precipice of this getting a lot worse if we don't back off a little bit. That's us, that's the Iranians. The Israelis are kind of doing their own thing right now because they have a bit of their own agenda, but people understand that's a little bit of a different thing. So your point is well made, and nobody has a good answer to your point, and that serves the problem.
So let me follow up with this. Who is actually honoring commitments, and who's actually testing new positioning?
Everybody. We're not obviously doing strikes and stuff today, but the Iranians are going to push the limits on this because they have the most important thing here, which is the Strait of Hormuz. That is their back against the wall, break glass. This is our biggest stick in the arsenal for us to protect ourselves and our interests, be as, diabolical as their interests are with that regime. They've still got it. And as of right now, they have control of that strait, and they're exerting further control of the strait. So as long as that's going on, they are testing us. They are testing the world order, and we're going to have a better answer than what we've had in the last 12 to 14 hours.
So, Mr. Operative, and this is for the public and the propaganda and the misinformation, how much of what the public is seeing right now is shaped by propaganda versus confirmed intelligence?
I think there's a terrible shortage of useful and confirmed accurate intelligence information getting to the top of the food chain in the U.S. The second thing is when you make all these moves in a rapid concession, and nobody can accuse the president of dawdling, he makes decisions and he makes things happen. But at some point, you need to step back, maybe take a quick pause, and assess what you've done so far, and is it contributing to whatever your end state is? I don't know if any of that is going on because we're moving at such a breathless speed. And there's people calling around trying to get answers, and there's media people trying to shape positions and articles that make no sense based on reality of dealing with Iran. Everybody is confused, I think, including the Iranians. They think that they have a certain advantage. They certainly are playing their cards close to the vest. They're used to being in the driver's seat, and they're used to using the model of predictability that the United States follows.
Well, let me stop you a minute.
Trump's not on that path.
You said something
they're at a loss.
I'm sorry. You said something very intriguing to me. Could our president and our Secretary of Defense, Head Chef, be confused as well?
I think there's a shortage of information, and that's one of the things that's always, people talk about the fog of war. When you start throwing steel around on enemy forces and you're killing people and you're dropping ordnance from the sky and you're bombing the hell out of somebody, at some point you need to step back and see what is the profound impact that we can measure on what our actions have been to date. And then you evaluate, is this supporting the end state goal that we set out in the beginning? I don't know what the goal was other than to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon and prevent them from closing the Strait of Hormuz. But other than that, I'm not sure what's going on. And if I'm confused, I understand how the inner system works in the U.S. government, or sort of works. people that don't have any visibility into that are confused as well.
So, let me raise this with Andrew. Is this conflict expanded beyond its original scope, particularly with non-state actors like the Houthis?
Well, we got to remember what Iran is. Iran has the premier, probably, terrorist proxy network in the world, although it's been greatly diminished since the October 7th attacks and events since then. But Iran itself is also used as a bit of a proxy because other countries, specifically like Russia and the Chinas of the world, like to use it as a thorn in the side of America and the GCC countries and others. You have the GCC, which was put together specifically to counter Iran. Then you have the Israeli piece, which is also an important piece. You have multiple layers of this all over this region. So there's no such thing as this ever going to be a contained thing. Then put on top of it the economic global thing. And the president is partially correct about how this doesn't affect us as much as others, but it greatly affects Asia. And we've been covering for a long time how much Asia affects our economy. These are all ripple effects. So the idea that this wasn't going to expand very far, very rapidly, especially with an Iranian regime that has planned to close that strait if they really got their back against the wall, it was kind of inevitable. Now, we do seem to have a bit of a pause here where maybe we can redirect and maybe get some coherency to some of this. But yeah, the idea that this wasn't going to expand was kind of farcical because everybody involved was going to expand it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, but let me stay with you because we have about a minute before we go to break. The question is asked is whether Israel really wants peace or ceasefire, because it seems that Israel does everything it can to disrupt everything that Donald Trump is doing to try to bring a ceasefire, to try to find a resolution. And it's obvious Donald Trump is in this for the short term.
Yeah, and Israel has a legitimate grievance of saying that Iran is an existential threat to the state of Israel because Iran has said so multiple times over and over again. The other piece of this that doesn't get covered very well in the Western media is the Israelis are getting ready to have themselves an election, and Benjamin Netanyahu, one of his main goals in life is to diminish the threat of Iran. He sees this as possibly his last chance to do so, and him and his government are going to maximize this opportunity to bomb the crap out of Iran and hit as much as they can hit for as long as they can hit, and that's running counter to the goals of not only President Trump and his ceasefire, but a lot of other people, and they're not going to let go of that lightly.
And we'll be back. Mr. Operative, is there a risk that political timelines are driving military decisions?
That happens all the time, Armstrong, and that is one of the systemic weaknesses of the United States, that you can string things out or compress the timeline and affect the political calculus inside the United States, which will cause an administration to hurry or stop or change direction. It's just part of the systemic weaknesses that are built into our system.
So, Andrew, where do you see the greatest intelligence gaps right now, especially with embassy closures and reduced presence?
Yeah, you worry about some of the planning on some of this because should we have cleared out more personnel from places? I know certain places like Bahrain, we had moved a lot of assets around and things like that, but you do wonder how much we did. Now, we know we've got really good tactical intelligence in Iran to do these strikes, to do the decapitation strikes. Our military has performed brilliantly, so we know that part of the intelligence is going well, but there does seem to have been a little bit of a gap on what they were going to be able to hit, and this comes into the pieces of, are the Iranians getting help? Are the Russians giving them target packagings and satellite imagings and that sort of thing? And we can speculate or get into that at some other time. But yeah, there seems to be some things like, should we clear out embassies ahead of time? That should have probably been done. Should we have cleared out civilians from parts of the Middle East, especially the high tourist areas? I don't even know if it's possible, but was it even discussed? Those are all things to discuss because the tactical intelligence has been really good. The regional intelligence on some of the repercussions seems like maybe there's some gaps there.
So let me stick with you. Who bears responsibility if the ceasefire collapses?
Well, to set the terms of the discussion, is this a technical ceasefire, or are we just all acting like there's a ceasefire? Because again, nobody signed anything on paper. And even in the president's own announcement, he's like, we've agreed to a framework to go have a meeting about the ceasefire where we're going to start negotiating this weekend with J.D. Vance and Wickoff and Kushner and all the rest of them. So we have an agreement to have a meeting about getting a ceasefire in technicality. So that kind of uncertainty, that puts the blame on a lot of people. But the Israelis are shooting, that could be the blame. If the Iranians hit something that really tick everybody off and we go back to full-blown strike packages, that would be their fault. And if we don't figure out a way to actually have a meaningful negotiation, that would be our fault. So the answer is probably going to be all of the above.
So, Mr. Operative, over the next 2 weeks, which are critical, what should we as Americans be most concerned about?
The things that affect us directly here, or what we're doing, is the price of fuel and energy. And it's going up. I just came back from the gas station, and it went up like another 12 cents per gallon. It's going up every day. And people are, it's hurting. It hurts. There's a great deal of pain coming from that. And my biggest concern right now, as far as where we are with the Iranians, is I don't know why we picked Pakistan. If you're going to negotiate with Iran, you have to negotiate in a location where you have somebody with leverage in the room. The Pakistanis have no leverage on the Iranians. The Russians do. This would have been the right time to have a negotiation in Moscow, because then you have another world power at the table. Pakistan looks out for Pakistan. Russia looks out for Russia's strategic needs from a completely different optic, which can be very helpful in a situation like this. So, but, that's just me. That's just my opinion. Like everybody else, everybody has one.
So, Andrew, listen, let's talk about the immediate economic consequences, which we have to, because wars are not fought in theaters. Wars impact are fought with how it impacts everyday U.S. households. And we can talk about oil prices, inflation, global markets. Talk about the impact.
Yeah, because you got to remember too, the halt in shipping is just now starting to show up.
Right.
The gas prices go up and down. The market reacts immediately, but a lot of that shipping, you get what's called bullwhip effects in logistics, because when they open the strait, a bunch of stuff will come surging through, and then that'll come up, and then it'll backfill what was not expected. You can't plan ahead for ships not showing up. Those things take weeks. So the actual effects of this war economically haven't even really started showing up yet. I know they do in gas prices, but the overall economy, it's going to take a long time for this, and that's if it all stops now and goes back to normal, which we already know it's not going to. And then you look at what's affecting the rest of the world. We already talked about the effects of Asia, all the LNG. A lot of people aren't talking about the fertilizer piece. They're already talking about we're probably going to have famine in Africa, India, and Southwest Asia, because so much of the fertilizer is bottled up right now when they really, really need it, and you can't backfill that sort of thing. This is going to have global ramifications that will trickle down to the U.S. in more than just gas prices.
It doesn't seem as though, Mr. Operative, there's a credible path to peace. It seems as though we're just managing the inevitable conflict that's going to continue to escalate.
We have not had peace since 1979 with Iran, and we will not have it after this.
Right. Amen. That's exactly
just where we are.
So in one sentence, Mr. Operative, are we closer to resolution of something that feels so much worse?
I think we're close to a short pause to try and evaluate where everybody is.
Pause? That's what you call it?
That's what I call
they're
it.
Repositioning. It's no short pause. You know exactly what they're doing here. And Iran needs it more than anybody else.
Iran needed some breathing space in order to reorder their leadership system and to get some orders stretched out around to the different command structures that operate under an Ayatollah order from a Grand Ayatollah. He gives an order. That order is valid until another Grand Ayatollah rescinds the order or issues a new order. So the go order remains on inside Iran. We've done nothing to change that.
So, Andrew, this is for the American people. They're stressed, They have anxiety. The reporting is like a roller coaster. They don't know what to believe. And when Trump says, get rid of a civilization, man, it's just, these are crazy times. But how prepared are everyday Americans for prolonged conflict in that region? And what price will Trump and his Republican sycophants play in the midterm elections?
They're not prepared. One of the economic indicators we don't talk enough about is personal debt. If you have personal debt, you are not prepared for crisis in any way, shape, or form. That's another topic for another day. So, yeah, you have to take care of your own house and have it in order. That's the American people. The American government also needs its house in order for when crises pop up. And you can't. And some of the president's strongest political strengths domestically are also his weaknesses foreign policy-wise. You cannot jawbone conflict. Conflict is not a real estate deal. There's not clear-cut winners and losers all the time. There's generational things that happen based off of conflict. So the good news is the American military has performed exceptionally well. The bad news is the civilian leadership of the greatest military the world has ever seen is not doing well. The problem with that is the civilian leadership is selected and picked by us, the voters. And we're going to have another election here for the midterm. We're going to have a presidential election coming up. We get what we voted for. This is a democratic republic that is representative government. And if we voted for it, and we did, this is what we get. We need to learn the lesson. And it's gone across both parties and multiple presidents that we don't do a good job picking the civilian leadership of our wonderful military, and we get in messes overseas. At some point, maybe we'll learn this lesson.
Mr. Operative, what are our allies saying, preparing for, maneuvering behind the scenes that we're not aware of?
I'm not sure there is a lot of behind the scenes because we've not had any representation in Iran since 1979. It might as well be an alien nation over there because what do we really know about how that place works? And the U.S. has got a completely different style of presidential leadership now that we've had certainly in my lifetime. And we've got a lot of other strong personalities when you look at the region, and especially with Iran and Israel. They work on their own time clock and their own strategic objectives, whether we complain about it or not. They're going to do what they think is best for them. The Ayatollah once said, the first Ayatollah, that Iran was a one-bomb country. It's a one-bomb issue. And in many respects, that's something that drives the Israelis to make the decisions that they do, because if you have a nuclear detonation, Iraq can become uninhabitable. I mean, Israel can become uninhabitable from one blast.
You know, it's true. But one of the things that we don't talk about when you talk about Israel in one blast is, Andrew, how the Iranians continue to attack Iran and Erbil every day, and how they continue to attack their enemies. It's so unstable, and this is what they do because they just don't have this warfare against the United States and Israel. It's against their own Arab neighbors.
Yeah, and Turkey caught a couple strays in this. We saw where they were attacking the Gulf states over and over again. Now, some of that may have been a command and control issue where the independent folks started launching stuff without a whole lot of control, as our friend brought up. That's a legitimate point,
that's
especially
the case
when
in
we're taking out
Erbil. They're attacking them every day.
No, they do that on purpose. No, that's on purpose. And look, we've got a long book on them. They do civilian terrorism better than anybody in the world. That's their brand. They export it. And if they can do it with missiles into Israel, they will do it. They've attacked in Iraq over the years, especially as of late. This is what they do. They do terrorism, both state sponsor and by proxy. That's not something that's probably ever going to change until the regime itself changes. And we probably just harden them to do it more and more in the future.
And this is how I want to close out this segment before we turn to our economy. And I'm going to start with you, Andrew, and conclude with Mr. Operative. What is your greatest fear, and how do you see this playing out? Can this be contained? We're in for, well, you answer.
Well, can it be contained? Yeah. The problem is, I think that what the status quo was is no longer tenable. So we're going to have a new status quo one way or the other. If the new status quo is the Iranians putting more and more pressure on the Strait of Hormuz until somewhere down the road, the international order, whether it's us or somebody else, is going to have to do something about it again, then yeah, this is going to be a stepping stone to further escalation. That's the first fear. The second fear is that this escalates immediately and turns into some kind of a regional conflict. Now, I don't know that we want to be putting troops on the ground anywhere near Iran. I don't think that's something that we should be doing. But if the Iranians hit something where we have to respond to it, yeah, this thing could escalate. And then you got to worry about the economics, especially in an election year. So it's a hot mess.
Mr. Operative, in a minute.
One of the key factors that doesn't get enough coverage is the fact that they're shooting into Erbil, which is one of our closest allied situations we have in the entire region. We've been with them since 1991. And that shooting right now, the Iranians are using their surrogates, which is their most potent and efficient surrogate tool, and they're driving drones and missiles inside that are hidden inside Iraq, driving them to Kirkuk and shooting into Erbil through a defensive gap in their protection of Erbil from the city of Kirkuk. That's happening inside Iraq. It happened last night. Every night they're shooting into Erbil. And it doesn't even get covered because there's no one there.
Mr. Operative, Mr. Donaldson.
It's not going to get better right now.
But if it's not going to get better, then you better pray because it could get worse. Thank you both for joining us. When we return, we'll turn our attention to your economy. We'll be back. You know, I wonder sometimes whether or not the U.S. economy is actually stabilizing, as I welcome my guest, Jordan Goodman. Or it's stabilizing, Mr. Goodman, at a higher cost of living.
Would not use the word stabilized right now. I think it's some chaos right now.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, inflation has gone up a lot. Now, things could go either way. I could give you the optimistic or the pessimistic scenario.
Just give us the truth. We just want the truth.
Well, it depends what happens as to what it turns out to be. So the optimistic scenario is what happened the last day holds, that the ceasefire holds, they come to some kind of a long-term agreement, the Strait of Hormuz opens, we don't have any more missiles and drones flying around the Middle East, we get some kind of a rough peace between the two, oil prices would drop sharply, which would bring down inflation. That's the optimistic scenario, and I certainly hope that happens. The pessimistic scenario is that ceasefire doesn't hold, hostilities resume, President Trump bombs all the civilian infrastructure in Iran. They retaliate with hitting all the infrastructure in the Gulf Coast and all the Gulf states and Israel. The Strait of Hormuz stays closed and oil prices soar way beyond 100 to 150 or higher. That's the worst case scenario. So we're not sure which way it's going to go. I certainly hope it's the first.
You know, listen, there are so many headlines that want to encourage Americans to believe that it's going to get better. And I know the president talks about numbers and gas prices. Sometimes I think the president needs a reality check on how Americans are really living. And I don't think you judge the real current economic situation of Americans by headlines. You judge it by households. You know, and it's interesting that people are still feeling financially strained despite the positive numbers, Jordan.
Well, there are some positive numbers. The unemployment numbers we got on Friday were definitely positive, 178,000 new jobs created during March. That was offsetting 122,000 job loss in February. So we came out slightly ahead, but the unemployment market is still kind of shaky here. Employers don't want to go out hiring a lot of people when they don't know the outlook. If inflation stays high and gas prices stay high, it means consumers have less money to go spending on things, whether it be restaurants or vacations or refrigerators, whatever it may be. So that hurts consumer spending, which kind of works its way through the economy. You need a strong consumer in America, which is 70% of the economy, in order to support economic growth. So that's why we're kind of at a turning point one way or the other. These high gas prices, over $4 nationally, and in California, $6 and $7 a gallon, take money out of consumers' pockets. They can't spend anywhere else.
So what matters most right now? Inflation coming down or prices remaining high?
Well, if we can get inflation down, the way to do that is to stop the war. You saw that yesterday when there was a ceasefire announced, which kind of surprised people. Oil prices fell the biggest amount ever in one day.
Right.
It went from about 111 to like 94. If that could continue, I mean, on normal circumstances, Armstrong, without the Gulf, all the war and all that, oil would be about $65 a barrel, something like that. So that would be kind of the normal supply-demand situation. Right now, there's a supply shock. They've got all these oil tankers in the Persian Gulf that can't get out. And one of the things that happened recently is that Iran says, okay, we'll let you go through with a toll, a $2 million per tanker toll, paid in either Bitcoin or Chinese yuan. Okay, the profit that is made on one tanker of oil is roughly $2 million. So it's non-economic. They're not going to go through and give all their profits to Iran. So this has not been worked out yet.
How concerned should Americans be about the national debt trajectory?
Concerned. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time. We're up to almost 39 trillion. The amount of debt is generating an interest bill of over $1 trillion a year. It's going to keep going up because interest rates are now higher than they had been. When a lot of this debt was taken out 3 and 4 years ago, interest rates were 1 or 2%. Now it's rolling over at 4.5%. So it's costing more. We're adding more debt. We're talking about increasing military spending. I heard a number of 200 billion, 1.5 trillion. I mean, we're adding dramatically to the amount of spending. That debt clock just keeps going. Now, one important thing that's going on that may be helpful here, Armstrong, is our entire economy has been supported by the petrodollar system. And what I mean by that is the Arabian countries sell their oil and get paid in dollars, and then they recycle that money back into the U.S. in treasury bonds and stocks and real estate and all kinds of things. If that breaks, meaning if people get paid in yuan or Bitcoin or something else, that underlying support for the U.S. economy, the whole petrodollar system, falls apart, and that really hurts the U.S. economy.
What happens to oil prices if tensions continue to rise, Jordan?
Much higher. I mean, we were over $100, 111, something like that. I mean, if it really rises, if we say we have an all-out war, and the ceasefire fails, and Trump bombs the infrastructure in Iran, and they bomb the infrastructure, including all the oil infrastructure in the Gulf states, oil could go to $200 a barrel, something like it, which makes a lot of the economy non-economic. When you raise the cost of transportation that much, people don't travel, they don't drive, they don't put trucks, they don't go by airplanes. It makes a lot of the economy uneconomic. So I certainly hope that doesn't happen, but that's the potential here.
So, Jordan, what is the biggest external threat that could derail economic stability?
I think just what we talked about, the higher oil prices certainly undermines economic stability. People just can't afford it. It's not only a price, but it's also a supply shock. In other words, people can't afford it, but they can't even get it. I'm hearing stories around the world now of people having lines and rationing. I mean, most of the oil from the Middle East goes to Asia or Europe. They don't have enough oil to survive in India and China and Korea and Australia and Japan and all these places. It's not even a matter of price. It's availability in many cases. So that's the biggest shock right now.
You know, give us a scenario for individuals, and I've seen this with all age group, no matter what's happening overseas, the rise in escalation and the conflict, the supply chain, there are those that seems to know how to ride this wave, find stability in the economy, create assets that the world will be the path to get. What is it about the uniqueness of certain people, certain businesses, that these kinds of times bring out the best in them.
They thrive. That's correct. Like during 2008, there were a lot of people that made a lot of money betting against real estate, for example. In this case, when you have higher inflation like this, what does well? Hard assets, gold, silver, oil, real estate, hard assets, because the value of your money is being depreciated by the prices of everything going way, way up. So that's why I think your listeners and your viewers should have some money in gold and silver and oil and things related to that, because hard assets benefit by this environment, whereas paper assets like bonds, stocks to some extent, get hurt.
Listen, what sectors benefit, unfortunately, during times of war? And I think you touched on that, but and why do they benefit? And what are the biggest risks to everyday Americans financially right now?
Well, the biggest risk is not being able to afford basic cost of living if fuel prices go up so much, or losing their jobs. I mean, companies lay people off and they can't afford. If they have to pay more for fuel, they have less for salaries. So that the higher fuel prices is a definite threat to the U.S. economy. As far as where they should be positioned, look at what's coming down the road. And again, in this case, we could go either way. I'm personally thinking it's not going to work. I do not think the ceasefire is going to hold, and I think we're going to resume hostilities. I hope not, but that's the way I would be betting right now, which means higher oil prices, higher gold and silver prices, lower stock market. All-out war is not good for anybody, but people who own hard assets.
There are some people who will tell us that sometimes you need to have wars like this to reset or to recalibrate an entire economy. Do you agree with that thinking?
No, I don't think that's a good idea at all.
But you've heard this concept.
Pretty well. Before this war, we were doing pretty well, actually. Inflation was coming down. We were down to the 2.5% range, something like that. That's clearly gone up. The stock market was doing pretty well. A lot of investment in data centers. The employment market was, in the 4% range. We were kind of relatively stable. This has upset the apple cart completely in an unpredictable way.
Why do you think there's such pushback on these data centers around the country?
Well, there's some pushback because when these things come in there, they use a huge amount of electricity, in many cases push up people's electricity costs. They use a lot of water, and they hum very loudly. I don't know if you've ever been next to one of these, Armstrong, but all those computers in there are humming quite loudly 24 hours a day. So if your home is anywhere within this thing, you just lost all your real estate values. So some towns are definitely pushing back against them, but a lot of places say, bring it in, bring the jobs.
Let me close with this before we move on. Listen, uncertainty is having a huge impact on consumer confidence and spending. How should they adjust to minimize this impact?
Plan for it. Assume gas prices are going to be higher. Keep a tight budget so you really know where you're spending your money. So if you have to spend more on gas because you have to get to work or get around, see where else from your budget you can take it out, because you don't want to go into debt. Consumers are going through a huge amount of debt right now, Armstrong. We're over $1 trillion in credit card debt at 20% interest rates plus. That's not the solution. The solution is getting your expenses under control for whatever income you've got.
When we come back, we continue to focus in on candidates that's running for office around the country. We're going to turn our attention to Arizona, where Rodney Glassman is leading the field to fulfill the position of Attorney General for the state of Arizona. Jordan, it's always a good to see you, my friend. I love the weather. I'm feeling the warmth. I just hope you could just send some of it our way, because I don't know what's going on with this weather. Maybe it's following the Easter snap. Maybe it'll get better pretty quickly. But thank you for joining us, okay?
All right. Thank you, Armstrong. Appreciate it.
And we'll be back. For those of you that don't know, I sit on the board of Child Help USA. I've been on and off the board for the last 30 years, and we fight for abused children. And at the recent gala, I met Rodney Glassman. And one of the things that I was struck by, and he's running for the Attorney General in Arizona, he made it clear that he embraces his Jewish heritage full armor, and that there had never been a Jewish Attorney General in the entire history of the state of Arizona. And not only is he running for his heritage, he's also running for law and order, which is very interesting when you meet these different candidates across the country. Rodney, finally, you made it to the airways. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. And the reality is what's happened, as you know, Armstrong, is it's no longer about any particular faith. As a speaker very articulately said a few weeks ago, first they came for the Saturday worshipers, and now they're coming for the Sunday worshipers. So the reality is that what we need in our Arizona Attorney General, what we need in attorney generals across the country, is prosecutors willing to fight anti-Americanism. And that's what this is about. And so I'm proud to be on your show. As you know, I'm a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, JAG Corps. I'm a reservist out at Luke Air Force Base, which is the largest fighter base in the world, and a private attorney. And my daughters go to school with your friend Tom's boys. And so faith, family, and law enforcement are the keys and the pillars to our campaign, along with supporting President Trump and securing our southern border.
Explain in detail this anti-Americanism that is the new battleground.
I'm running for Attorney General to protect our law enforcement, to protect our kids, and to protect Arizona's prosperity. One of the biggest misunderstandings when it comes to the role of our 46 elected attorney generals across the country is that it's very different than our federal attorney general. As you know, when people think about the term and the job attorney general, we think of our U.S. attorney general. We elect the president of the United States. We have President Trump, and President Trump appoints an attorney general. This interview is quite timely because, as you know, just last week, the president chose to pick a different attorney general. Well, in Arizona, we're one of the 46 states where we elect our attorney general. So the attorney general in Arizona doesn't work for the governor, doesn't work for the legislature, is supposed to work for the people. And what we have right now in Arizona is an attorney general in a Republican state where President Trump won by over 5 percentage points. Our attorney general has sued the administration over 40 times. Over 40 times, fighting the things that are common sense.
So you're speaking of Chris Mays.
I'm talking about liberal Chris Mays. She has sued the administration 40 times in the past 14 months. And so when I talk about anti-Americanism, I talk about the fact that I believe that under no circumstances should someone be shooting at ICE agents. And we have a Democrat attorney general in Arizona, Armstrong, that just 30 days ago was on television doing interviews as the chief law enforcement officer for the state of Arizona, talking about when she thinks it's okay to shoot ICE agents. We have an attorney general right now in Arizona who's suing the Trump administration because she thinks that biological boys should compete against little girls in interscholastic sports. That's the type
so
of attorney general we have now.
let me interrupt you. What specifically would you stop doing on day one, and what would you immediately start doing to change the role of that office in the state of Arizona?
Thank you for that question. On day one as attorney general, I will withdraw Arizona from the 40 clickbait lawsuits that Chris Mays has filed against the Trump administration. And on day one, I will have the power to rescind the political indictments that Chris Mays has made against good Republicans, frankly, across the country, simply for supporting President Trump. But in order to do that, and that's why we're working so hard right now, Republicans in Arizona have to nominate a candidate to defeat Chris Mays, who's actually practiced law. And Armstrong, in our Republican primary here in Arizona, believe it or not, there's only 2 of us, and I'm the only Republican that's ever prosecuted, that's ever had law clients. and that even carries professional liability insurance. We've got a crazy Republican primary that's very simple to understand. But at the end of the day, my job is to educate people on the job, because in Arizona, it's even different than a lot of other states. It's the largest law office in the state of Arizona, 400 attorneys and 1,000 support staff providing all the legal services for every state agency.
I hear you mention Trump. I hear you mention Republicans. But what Americans don't need now is a partisan attorney general. They need someone who represents all the people. And law and order, justice is blind, and you represent everyone.
You are 100% correct. At the end of the day, every Arizonan wants to be able to call 911 and have a police officer come and have the police officer be able to make split-second decisions focused on protecting the families in the community. And as long as we have an attorney general who's going after law enforcement, then the split-second decision that's going through their head is this the decision that's going to end my career? So I always talk about how I will have law enforcement's back every time. And that's why the Maricopa County Sheriff, Jerry Sheridan, who runs the third largest law enforcement agency in the country, that's why he's chairing my campaign. Because the only elected official in Arizona that can protect law enforcement is the Attorney General.
So
and to your point.
No, go ahead, make the point.
Oh, I was going to say, to your point, when it comes to kids and families, I always remind everyone I'm the only statewide candidate that uses the F word in every speech.
So let me.
But the F word's family.
Family. So listen, this is your critics. Of course, we have to do our homework when we bring our guests on. And your critics say you position yourself as a law and order candidate with a prosecutorial background. But they talk about the questions raised about your campaign finance practices. What do you say to voters that will entrust you to enforce the law when those concerns are still out there? And how do you address the critics? And how you run your finances?
Well, there's that old saying I'm sure you taught your kids too. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And because of our Republican primary, where we're literally running against a 50-year-old termed out state legislator who got his law license 25 months ago, the only thing that my Republican primary opponent can do is go on the attack. So he had one of his neighbors file a campaign finance complaint against my treasurer. In Arizona, the only person that is never involved in touching the money or the finance reports is guess who?
The candidate.
The candidate.
Yeah.
The candidate. So it's all about creating distractions because I'm running against a part-time realtor, never practiced law, so that we can run against Chris.
So you answer that. I want to get the most out of what little time we have left. How should American leadership be responding to rising global conflict? And do you believe the current administration has a clear strategy on that conflict?
I support President Trump's
that's
agenda
clear.
When it comes to fighting for democracy across the country and around the world. The reality is we need strong leadership. We need people that are willing to stand up and say what they mean and then follow it up with action. And that's what we see in President Trump. That's why he has been so effective. That's why he continues to be so effective. And that's why here in Arizona, we're working to make sure that there's a Republican attorney general, and I say Republican because that does matter in Arizona, someone who is going to support the president's agenda, someone who's going to protect law enforcement, someone who's going to protect our families. And that's what this campaign is about. And that's why I hope your viewers will visit my website at rodneyglassman.com, because
so
the attorney general is the most impactful office in the state.
We're going to have your opponent on. Well, we're going to invite them on. Whether they come on or not is up to them, but we're going to certainly extend the invitation. What about the rhetoric and the tone of these campaigns?
My campaign is about experience. Experience, because the Attorney General runs the largest law office in the state. So if you do have my opponent on, and I know you're a successful businessman and you've interviewed attorneys before, and this is a job interview to be the attorney for the largest office in the state of Arizona, to run it, my question of every candidate running for Attorney General would be, tell me the name of your last 3 paying clients. because you'd never get a haircut from a barber that'd never done it before. You'd never get a knee replacement from an orthopod that had never done surgery. You'd never hire a realtor who'd never sold a house before, and so you don't want to hire a lawyer
what do
that's
you
never
do?
been a lawyer.
So we've got about a minute left. What is it that you need to change about law and order in 30 seconds?
We need to make sure that police officers are respected, are appreciated, that they know they can do their job, and that starts by simply having elected officials at the state level, at the leadership level, to stand up every day and say, I respect law enforcement. It's a noble profession. They should be able to do their jobs, and that's what I plan to do as the
Mr.
Attorney
Glassman,
General.
it's just a pleasure having you on. We look forward to talking to your opponent, and we wish you well. I want to thank our earlier guest, Mr. Operative Andrew Donaldson, Jordan Goodman, and thank you for joining us for this edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show. Please enjoy the remainder of your weekend, and a shout out to the T&D staff for always doing a great job with our production. I'm Armstrong Williams, and guess what? We're out of here.